At number 5, the Helderberg. In 1987, South Africa was ruled by an extremely racist government that tried to enforce a segregated society. As a result, multiple countries decided to ban South African Airways from flying over their territories. This created a very challenging situation, since the company had to find alternative routes in order to stay in operation. One of the routes they settled on was Flight 295, which flew between Taipei, Taiwan, and Johannesburg, South Africa. The route also included a refueling stop on the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. What's interesting is that this flight went over a unique part of the Indian Ocean that commercial airlines rarely ever ventured into. It was a way for South African Airways to navigate around the countries that banned them while still serving the limited number of destinations they could. That wasn't the only notable thing about Flight 295 either. The plane serving this route was a Boeing 747 Combi nicknamed the Helderberg, meaning that it had been adapted to fit both cargo and passengers on the main floor of the aircraft. On November 26, 1987, Flight 295 set off from Taiwan's Chiang Kai-shek International Airport with 159 people on board, passengers, and crew. Everything seemed to be going just fine, until about 9 hours into the trip. Air traffic controllers stationed in Plaisance Airport in Mauritius suddenly got a disturbing distress call. The radio conversation was panicked, as the crew reported a fire on board. They were still around 30 minutes away from Plaisance Airport, which was a long time before help from the ground could help put out the flames. The airport control tower stayed in contact with Flight 295 until they reported they were just 65 miles away from the runway. After this, despite multiple attempts to reach back out to them, the aircraft was never heard from again. When news of the missing 747 reached South Africa, officials immediately sprang into action, launching a search and rescue operation. Planes and boats from Mauritius, South Africa, and even the United States joined forces to find the aircraft. But the distress call from the Helderberg wasn't accurate when revealing its last known location. The crew reported a distance of 65 miles to the next waypoint. This was mistakenly taken by air traffic control as their position relative to the airport. Flight 295 actually crashed much farther out to sea than first believed. On November 28th, there was a glimmer of hope when a volunteer search plane saw an oil slick and some floating debris out in the ocean. Responding quickly, ships were at the location within 9 hours, eager to uncover any signs of survivors of the aircraft itself. Sadly, once they got there, they saw only scattered pieces of luggage, an escape slide, and a few extremely damaged bodies. As the search pressed on, crews worked tirelessly to recover what human remains they could find from the ocean. Tragically, only 8 bodies were located intact, and it became evident there was not a single survivor among the 159 people who had been on the flight. As the search teams scanned the Indian Ocean, they gradually discovered more clues that shed light on the most likely sequence of events that happened in the air. Among the floating debris, they recovered pieces that showed clear signs of fire damage. Passenger's watch taken from the wreckage stopped at precisely 4:07 a.m. local time, just 3 minutes after the aircraft's last communication. The autopsies of the 8 victims who were still intact revealed that all of them inhaled smoke before their deaths. Shockingly, at least 2 of them succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning, not the crash's impact. These findings, along with the assigned seating positions of these passengers, led investigators to conclude that toxic smoke had already filled most of the passenger cabin before the crash took place. Putting all these pieces together, it became clear that a deadly and fast-spreading fire engulfed the cabin with toxic smoke. This catastrophe likely incapacitated the passengers and crew, leaving them helpless and unable to regain control of the aircraft. In order to locate the Helderberg wreckage on the ocean floor, the South African government launched an international operation called Operation Resolve. They invested millions of dollars into the effort. In January 1988, sonar scans revealed 2 different debris fields approximately 135 miles northeast of Mauritius. The wreckage was at an astonishing depth of over 4,400 meters, even deeper than the Titanic's final resting place. Reaching the 737 required the construction of a record-breaking 6,000-meter-long cable to send a submersible down for recovery. Preparations took months, but finally, after over a year since the initial crash, the submersible reached the wreckage. 2 months after this, the cockpit voice recorder was recovered. Unfortunately, because of its long exposure to the ocean depths, the first 28 minutes of the tape were unintelligible. But the last 100 seconds of the recording were eerily clear, capturing the exact moment when the emergency started. With the combination of evidence now available to them, investigators were able to piece together a basic outline of what really happened. It seems that a fire initially broke out in the front right pallet of the cargo bay, which held computers and other items. The fire then spread to packaging materials, generating smoke that activated the main deck's cargo fire alarm. During the investigation, it was revealed that the recirculating fans were still turned on at the time of the crash, meaning that the fumes from the fire in the cargo hold were getting inside the passenger cabin. Since some of the victims died from carbon monoxide poisoning, investigators hypothesized that the toxic smoke likely caused the deaths of many well before the Helderberg crashed. The story of South African Airways Flight 295 didn't come to an end here. Instead, it took an unexpected turn as conspiracy theories popped up and started to gain traction. These theories shared a common theme. They suggested that the true cause of the fire was something not mentioned on the official cargo manifest. After the downfall of South Africa's apartheid government in 1994, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission was put in place to investigate and shed light on the crimes committed during that time. As part of its investigations, the TRC re-examined the crash of South African Airways Flight 295. In a series of hearings concerning revelations came to light, it was revealed that Arms Corps, the corporation responsible for supplying a majority of the equipment to the South African military, engaged in smuggling weaponry on commercial passenger flights because of an arms embargo. There were reports of rockets being loaded onto a South African Airways flight by a ground handler in Tel Aviv, and Captain Uys's widow even made claims that he expressed concerns about signing off on shipments containing hazardous goods. With these new revelations, the TRC concluded that it was very likely illegally smuggled weaponry that was the root cause of the fire of the Helderberg. This shocking revelation added a new dimension to the tragedy, shedding light on the dangerous secret operations that were taking place. The investigation into Flight 295's crash opened up an unsettling chapter in South Africa's history, exposing the greedy actions taken to bypass international sanctions. Did the Helderberg story shock you? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. And now, here's more mysterious plane crashes. Number 4. Flying Tiger Line Flight 739. 60 years ago, during the start of the Vietnam War, there was a flight called Flying Tiger Line Flight 739, which carried military personnel to Saigon, Vietnam. The flight was operated by the Military Air Transport Service and made stops in Honolulu, Wake Island, Guam, and the Philippines. On March 15, 1962, the plane took off from Guam with 11 crew members and 96 passengers on board, including U.S. Army soldiers who were trained in electronics, communications, and sharpshooting. The total number of people on the plane was 107, including 3 Vietnamese service members. It's believed that those on board were selected for a special top-secret mission, since one of the passengers, Donald Sargent, was supposedly called back into military service by then-President John F. Kennedy. About 2 hours into the flight, the pilot radioed Guam, indicating that they were on track and going to land in the Philippines on time. But that was the last communication received from the plane. Despite extensive search efforts, the plane and all of its occupants disappeared over the Pacific Ocean, and no wreckage or signs of the crash were ever located. Some witnesses on a ship in the area reported seeing a possible mid-air explosion around the estimated time of the flight, but no conclusive evidence was found. The search operation involved over 1,300 people, 48 aircraft, and 8 ships, but it yielded no firm results. The incident is one of the biggest aviation mysteries in history and continues to haunt the families of those who were on board, since their names were not included in the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Number 3. Air France Flight 447. Air France Flight 447 seemed like a regular trip that aimed to take passengers from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil to Paris, France. On May 31, 2009, the flight had 216 passengers and 12 crew members on board. Everything was fine during takeoff, and the plane was flying at a common but high altitude along the coast of Brazil. The weather was also typical for that time of year, even with strong storm clouds causing a bit of turbulence. In the early morning hours of June 1, 2009, the captain went to rest a bit, leaving the third pilot in charge. Shortly after, both pilots began to notice a strange smell and felt warm, probably because there was ice and water being sucked into the engines. The plane then started shaking as it hit more turbulence caused by the ice crystals. At 2:10 a.m., the autopilot and autothrottle stopped working, and the plane began tilting to the right. The airspeed indicator also showed a significant drop, and the altitude decreased. The first officer retook control of the plane manually, but they received multiple warning messages and alarms, making it difficult for them to understand what was actually happening. The situation quickly became chaotic, and the plane bounced up and down like a roller coaster. At 2:12, the engines couldn't retain enough power, and the aircraft started shaking violently. The captain was back in the cockpit, but it was too late to make a recovery. The plane was trapped in a stall, meaning it lost lift and started falling, ultimately crashing into the Atlantic Ocean. Number 2. Flight 191. Typically, flight numbers are assigned based on routes or the operating airline. When a plane crashes, the airline usually retires that flight number out of respect for its victims. But there's one flight number, Flight 191, that has been involved in more than its fair share of crashes. The first incident with this specific number was on March 5, 1963, when Aeroflot Flight 191 crashed in the middle of a dust storm in Turkmenistan, killing 12 people. On June 24, 1972, Prinair Flight 191 crashed in Puerto Rico, causing 5 deaths due to a misunderstanding with the control tower. Then, on May 25, 1979, American Airlines Flight 191's engine failed during takeoff from Chicago, taking the lives of 273 people on board and 2 on the ground. Another crash happened on August 2, 1985, involving Delta Airlines Flight 191, where a microburst caused the plane to crash near Dallas, Texas, leading to 137 deaths. On August 27, 2006, Com Air Flight 5191 crashed during takeoff in Kentucky. The last known incident was on March 27, 2012, when JetBlue Airways Flight 191's captain was behaving erratically mid-flight. Luckily, the first officer managed to land the plane safely and no one was hurt. Although some people believe in the curse of Flight 191, it's likely just a terrifying coincidence. United Airlines and Spirit Airlines are the only ones still currently using flight number 191. So far, a combined total of 477 lives have been lost in these incidents. And at number 1, MH370. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, a Boeing 777, took off from its scheduled flight, but approximately 42 minutes after midnight, the plane veered off its intended path and vanished off radar. This incident triggered a mystery that captured the world's attention. Before its disappearance, the flight operated normally for 40 minutes. As the plane approached the end of Malaysian airspace, the air traffic control tried to hand communication over to Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control since the aircraft was entering Vietnamese airspace, but there was no response from the plane and all attempts to contact it were futile. Shortly after crossing into Vietnamese airspace, MH370 was gone. The sudden loss of contact left Malaysian controllers and the airline confused and worried, while the loved ones of passengers anxiously awaited their arrival in Beijing, unaware of the tragedy unfolding. The incident sparked intense global interest, a massive search and rescue operation across the Indian Ocean, and conspiracy theories. According to one well-supported theory, based on data from a geostationary Indian Ocean satellite, the plane kept flying for several hours, heading south until it exhausted its fuel reserves. It's believed that someone, possibly the pilot, intentionally depressurized the cabin, incapacitating everyone on board before the plane crashed into the Indian Ocean, somewhere between Australia and Antarctica. This assumption finds backing from aviation experts, scientists, and Australian investigators who dedicated years to looking for MH370 in a remote section of the Indian Ocean. Not only that, but it was revealed later on that the pilot, Zahari Ahmad Shah, plotted out similar routes to the supposed course of the flight on an at-home flight simulator, suggesting that the crash was intentional. Even so, the official Malaysian accident report released in July of 2018 did not conclusively confirm this theory and left open the possibility of unlawful interference by a third party. There were other beliefs that floated about from several sources. One suggested that Russian agents hijacked the plane, gaining access through a hatch in the first-class cabin's electronic bay to divert attention away from the Crimean War. Another suggested that the US military probably shot the plane down over the South China Sea to stop some mysterious cargo from reaching China. Despite extensive search efforts, the complete truth behind MH370's disappearance is unknown to this day. This mysterious vanishing act has left the world still questioning, and it continues to be the subject of discussion among aviation experts, researchers, and the public. Thanks for watching. Which one of these plane crashes did you find the most interesting? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. See you next time.